Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for joining. And this is the session introduction to the GENIVI Alliance. My name is Steve Crumb. I'm the executive director with GENIVI. I work for an association management organization, an ecosystem development organization called Global Inventures based in the Bay Area. We manage about 25 to 30 technical alliances and standards development organizations. So if any of you have an interest in starting a brand new alliance or a new forum, or just want to get some other organizations together in tandem with your interest, give me a call, let me know. We'll see if we can't help out with that. But I have the pleasure of introducing you to the GENIVI Alliance today. It's sort of my baby. I've been with the GENIVI Alliance since before it was an alliance. It started out with an idea, a concept of joining together and working together with some technology organizations to develop IVI software. And now about, fast forward 3.5 years later, we're 170 members and really producing some really cool stuff. So hopefully, through today's discussion, we'll figure out why there is a GENIVI, what its missions and deliverables are, what are we targeting, what's our approach, how's it different from other automotive alliances, and then we'll talk a little bit about the status and future of the organization. So why GENIVI? If you've looked at very many car commercials lately, it's either about Detroit or it's about IVI. You'll see more and more that automotive organizations are pushing out there the notion of delivering services and functionality and features to the driver. And those features and functions are all based on requirements. And frankly, the market today, there's a lot of inconsistency across requirements across the marketplace. There's some questions about, where the future is going with automotive requirements, especially around infotainment. And yet there's a very keen interest on the consumer's end to have the greatest and best functionality available to them in the car. They want to be able to walk from their office or walk from their home, get in their car and have very little delta in experience change, very little, have all their music available, have all their systems available, have their documents available, have their contacts available. They just want that transition into the automobile to be clean and transparent. And so we see a lot of new software needing to be developed to support these features and functions. And frankly, the OEMs are quite keen to deliver that functionality because that sells cars. Beforehand, you buy a car, you got a radio, so what? It's a radio. But now you got a little bit more. You got a nav system, you've got contact list, you've got your Bluetooth capabilities. It's a little bit more attractive to the end user. And so this is something that the OEMs are pushing, consumers are pulling, and so it's just an interesting opportunity for organizations to take advantage of. Not too long ago, you could go and buy a PC for the $1999, but then it became the $999 PC, and now it's about the $499 PC, right? And so you see that sort of a decline in costs, and so there's financials involved in head units and in development of this functionality in the car as well. So you're seeing a declining cost, and yet you're seeing more and more software development needed to support the features, high-end features and functions that end consumers are wanting. And so you've got that push and pull from a financial point of view. And so there's some challenges in the ecosystem around this functionality. Wouldn't it be nice if we had a single general purpose operating system that could support these features and functions, as opposed to having to maybe pick and choose between a low end for a lower end profile of IVI features and functions versus the high end. I mean, most automotive organizations today, they're not just delivering a single head unit. They're not just delivering a single end user experience. They've got multiple lines of cars, multiple products, some more low end, some more high end. And so they're not just developing one system. They're having to develop multiple systems. And that's driving the cost up of developing those systems. And so wouldn't it be nice if we had a single automotive middleware that we could use across all of those profiles? And that would reduce the cost and would allow software suppliers and OEMs to redeploy those developers that they were using to develop that middleware, that low-end middleware into more interesting customer value add applications and user interface. And so there's a lot of things happening in the market. A lot of it has to do with reducing cycle time for the development and reducing cost. And software suppliers and automotive OEMs are looking for ways to meet those two requirements. Oops. So, the president of the GENIVI Alliance, Graham Smethurst from BMW, likes to use this analogy of Groundhog Day. Groundhog Day is about OEMs wanting to develop this overall system of having hardware at the base, having the middleware and operating system, having a robust set of applications, and then a man-machine interface or HMI that really speaks to the branding of that organization and really gives the end user, the driver, an environment in which they can be productive and efficient. So even though they start out with focusing on one system, in reality, as I mentioned before, there's multiple profiles within a product line. So you might have more of a low-end automobile, more of a high-end automobile, and yet you have an organization who really has to build all three of these to meet the needs of their organization. And so, you know, for example, a high-end might require more intensive graphics capabilities, and so you want to have a different choice of hardware to meet this professional end, this high profile of IVI functionality. And then there's the mid-level, and then there's the entry level, and maybe you can save a few bucks on your hardware on the entry level, but you want some consistency because you are a brand, you are an OEM, and you want to deliver a consistent user interface within the organization, across the lines. And so, to some degree, OEs want to control that last mile of delivering their functionality to the driver. So they want to have a consistent man-machine interface. They want to have a consistent user interface that speaks to their brand. So BMW, when you get into BMW, they're going to have a different man-machine interface than Peugeot might have, or that VW might have, or that GM might have. And so, but they want to have a single one. They want to brand it consistently. So how do we do this and save some time? Well, they also want to deliver a set of applications that really provide customer value add, that bring them to buy a BMW car as opposed to buying a VW or buying another type of car. And one idea here is to basically standardize the automotive middleware and operating system to enable there to be a reuse across all profiles of that middleware. And if that middleware it plugs into multiple hardware options, that gives the OEM the favorite word, which is choice. They can choose between various hardware options, not only because of what they have to deliver to their customer, but because the middleware enables them to do that, and they can save money that way. So, with all that background and those problems defined, that's where GENIVI comes in. What's GENIVI trying to do? We're a nonprofit industry alliance committed to driving the broad adoption of IVI software, and doing so in a way that we align requirements across multiple OEMs. We're delivering reference code, which any member organization can leverage and use and reuse and improve. And we offer a compliance program so that we're not all over the board, but we're moving in a direction towards a roadmap that's consistent, that's reliable, that organizations can count on. And I think we're doing very well. We're fostering this vibrant open source IVI ecosystem. 170 members. Our all-member meetings are probably the hottest event to be at for this particular market because everybody's there. They're talking with suppliers. A lot more business, frankly, gets done at some of our events than even technology improvement and activity. So things are really moving with GENIVI. Our purpose is to ease product integration through reuse, through delivering a reference platform, encourage open innovation and inheritance from adjacent industries. We're nothing new. I mean, Jim's going to get up here in a few minutes, and he's going to talk about all the other industries who've been there, done that, done this, and we're just bringing it into automotive. We're not doing anything special. We're introducing Linux and open source development and community development techniques into the automotive ecosystem, leading somewhat of a revolution. And revolutions, unfortunately, tend to be a little bloody at times, but we're trying to lead that revolution. But at the end of the day, what we're trying to deliver is we're trying to get OEMs together and say, look, do we really need 42 different ways to sort a phone book within an automobile? Because that's a real-life example. I talked to a Tier 1 organization, and he said, Steve, I got it. For all my products, all the different organizations I work with, I have to build and maintain 42 different ways to sort a phone book. Do we really need 42 different ways to sort a phone book? Or can OEMs align themselves around 8 or 10 and make that commodity functionality, utility functionality, and deliver that into the ecosystem? And then if the OE and his supplier wants to do additional activity around, another 3 or 4 or another 5 or 6 ways to make them their sorting activity that special, then they can do that. But let's figure out a way to do it 8 or 10 times. Let's do it once, let's reuse it, and then you can build additional functionality on top of that. We deliver code. We do care about paper. We do care about standards. We do deliver a compliance specification. But at the end of the day, we care a whole lot more about code. We want to get code out there. We want people to use code, develop code. We want to find code that's reusable, and we want to deliver that into the ecosystem. And so that's what we're about. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the compliance program against which the open source and commercial offerings can be certified, and ISVs and other organizations can develop. So that's really, in a nutshell, what GENIVI is about. How are we structured? We're a pay-to-play alliance model. Membership fees make up most of our revenue, but our participation is open to all levels. So we don't, from a technical point of view, we don't differentiate whether you can be involved in a work group, a technical work group, or whether you're a low-tier member or a high-tier member. You're all welcome to engage in a technical way. We have a global reach. This is a little bit of an old slide. We've got 11 automakers, about 170 members today. And what we're really trying to do is drag the automotive software development ecosystem into more of a community model, more of an open source driven model, and deliver code into the industry. This has been interesting because over the course of the last 3 years, we started out with a whole lot of automotive organizations. And if you look at the organizations who've joined in the last 6 months, most of them are organizations who have deep experience in developing open source software. And so there's a real mix in GENIVI between deep automotive expertise and a growing number of open source organizations who are developing software with community-driven techniques. What's our target? This is a religion in GENIVI. We focus on what is our target. We know that the OEMs and to some degree their suppliers want to develop the interface to the user and the app stores and the applications that deliver real value to the driver. And that is their domain, and we do not tread on that domain. We have this little line here, squiggly line. We wish it was nice and clear and straight across, but in fact it's sort of squiggly, where we focus on the open source IVI stack and its integration into an open source kernel. What we call the non-differentiating features, the middleware, the utility software, that is what we're focused on. Delivering that and making that available to our members and to some degree to even our non-members. And we leave the differentiation, we leave the really cool stuff to the OEMs because they're the ones who are ultimately delivering it to their drivers. The other thing that we're religious about is we don't create it unless it's not out there. We have what we call an adopt, adapt, create model. And if there's something out there that does what we need, we adopt it. We go get it from an upstream project and we pull it in and we integrate it. And it becomes a part of our compliance program. If there's something out there that's 60, 70, 80% there, maybe there's a manager, some sort of a manager tool that was made for mobile handsets and doesn't quite have all of the automotive requirements in it, but it's a good starting point for us. Then we go out and we adapt that. We spend time in that upstream project providing requirements, providing code, telling them why, not just throwing code over the wall, but going in there and say, hey, in order for this to work in an automotive context, here are the requirements, here's some patches that we want you to consider, and we work with the upstream maintainers to get those patches into those upstream projects so that we can adopt those into our platform. And if there isn't anything out there that we can adopt or that's a good starting point, then at that point we begin to create the software ourselves. And we've got a tremendous base of automotive developers. And so it's not that hard for us to actually create really, really automotive specific functionality that isn't already out in an open source community. So how that plays out is that the 80% of our platform is basically just adopted from upstream projects. And another 15% is what we call adapted. It's out there, it's to some level of what we want, but it needs a little bit more automotive touch to it. And then 5% is what we do internally. So this adopt, adapt, and create model is something we live by day to day. Don't want to spend a lot of time on this slide, but this was a slide that was created from the proof of concept that we did before GENIVI even started. And the only thing that's interesting here is that on the left-hand side, all the blue is stuff that in the old way of building IVI software would have had to have been created from scratch through some sort of a software supplier. On the right-hand side, everything that's in green is software in the IVI stack today that we have inherited. In other words, we didn't have to rebuild all that blue stuff. We just inherited the green stuff. And then we could focus our attention on the pink or purple or whatever it is and really make that additional software fill the need. And so you can see immediately a cost savings and a development cycle savings because of all the software that we're inheriting through this model. So what is GENIVI doing? We're introducing Linux and open source software into a historically proprietary environment. Again, this is nothing new. This has happened in various other ecosystems and industries. We're trying to reduce development and validation costs. We're trying to reduce development lifecycle. And that's essential to stay in, current with the latest CE devices. So, I mean, if I had you raise your hand of, how many of you have gotten a new smartphone in the last 12 months? Quite a few of you would raise your hand. How many of you would say that, well, you traded in your old IVI unit for a new IVI unit in the last 12 months? Not so many. So you got a 12-month development cycle time for the latest smartphone, and that's 12 months is stretching it these days. And you got a 5-year development life cycle in the standard automotive space, okay? So we got to bring those back together a little bit. You don't want to deliver the latest and greatest car and not be able to plug in your latest smartphone. So we need to reduce development cycle time. Frankly, it's been a bit of a revolution, a bloody revolution, frankly. Most of the automotive organizations are control freaks. They like to have a big stick and say, look, we're going to do it our way. These are the requirements. We want them done this way. And if you don't do them, whack. Okay, well, that doesn't work so much in the open source community. Okay, you can still have your requirements, but it's more of a teamwork. It's more of a, hey, have you thought about this? Can we introduce this requirement in? Can we work with this patch? And can you take this into your software? And so there has been a fair degree of re-education of some very high quality automotive developers to work in a more of a community-based model. And that's something that we actually have worked with the Linux Foundation on to help experienced automotive developers learn the best practices of open source software development. So what are our challenges? We talked a little bit about how automotive participants are very traditional and risk averse. The whole notion of open source licensing, sometimes for some organizations their eyes just cross and they say, wait a minute, do I have to give away all my IP if I put stuff in the open source? Is it going to contaminate my special sauce that I want in my software? And there's just a lot of questions that, frankly, the answers are pretty simple. But there's a fear of the unknown. And so what we've tried to do is provide education and awareness and so forth to these organizations. And the other challenge is that there's a lot of organizations that want to join GENIVI, But they have all their technical guys have day jobs, and they're working on products, and it's very difficult to get quote-unquote volunteer labor to work in an alliance. It's true of just about every alliance that I'm aware of, but in this particular alliance, it's been challenging to get the necessary level of engagement. So one of the things that we're beginning to do is move our projects a little bit more into the open. We have been sort of behind the firewall, as is typical with automotive organizations. We like to control things, but we're beginning to get to the point where it's like, you know what, that stymies innovation. We want to create a very innovative environment. So we want to push our code development activities more into the public. We want to get individuals who are in adjacent industries who have been more involved in innovation in the open source community for years. We want those types of organizations to engage in our code development activities. So you'll see a little bit of over the course of the next 6 to 12 months, a little bit of an evolution within GENIVI to become much more open to outside developers. A real quick word on our GENIVI compliance program. At the end, we do deliver a compliance specification. What that specification looks like is a set of OEM-aligned requirements. So we bring in requirements, the OEMs look at them, they align, yeah, that's important to us, that's not so important to us, that's differentiating, that's not so, that's something I want to take control of. And at the end of the day, we have a set of aligned requirements for the features and functions of an IVI unit. And then the other part of the compliance program is what is the functionality, what are the components and the packages that are created to meet those requirements. So a compliance specification is not a magical document. It's a set of requirements, and it's a set of specified components that say this component matches and implements all of these requirements, okay? The only other thing that we do is that when we do specify a component, we say it's a priority one, it's a mandatory, or it's an optional. And we do that for a reason. We don't want to specify the entire stack. Because if we specify the entire stack, then there's no room for software organizations to bring in their special sauce. So if we say, you know what, for the Bluetooth stack, you have to use this set of components and only this set of components, well, what about the commercial guys out there that have a really cool set of components that sell a set of components that meet the Bluetooth functionality? And so there is some flexibility in our compliance program. It's still quite an immature approach. It's maturing by the week and by the year, and more requirements are being dumped in, and more components are being specified, but still allowing flexibility for the commercial stream. We have now 13 compliant platforms. 3 more have been approved in the last month, and then we've got 3 more under review. And so it is quite a popular program. I think that those 13 platforms come from, I believe, 11 different organizations. So there's a pretty broad pickup of this compliance program within GENIVI. So where are we headed? We're going to continue to improve our primary deliverable, which is our compliance specification. That means we're going to keep going back to the OEMs and saying, look, what's the new features? What's the new functions? What are the new use cases that you need in your IVI unit? And what portion of those use cases are commodity functionality, are non-differentiating features, and that gives us our marching orders to go out and look in the open source community for software that's already out there that can either be adopted or adapted, and where there isn't anything out there, then we create that internally. And then as we identify those components and create them or adapt them, then we add additional specified components into our compliance program. And so this compliance specification over time is going to continue to be quite a enhanced standard that OEMs can look at and say, when they send out their RFQs for their software, they can say, that needs to be GENIVI compliant, and that will mean something in the industry. And then we want to continue to accelerate the delivery of baseline code. This is really what we're about. We do, again, we have the compliance specification, but we really want to deliver the baseline code to the industry. So we'll continue to do the adopt and adapt as we get more prevalent in open source communities, get a better name out there. We expect organizations to come to us and say, hey, we've got this Does it work in a car? And we'll look at it and we'll say, well, almost. But you know, these tweaks here, and we're golden. So that's what we'll continue to do. And we'll continue to do the create activities where it makes sense to do so. iChart here, this is the latest, well, almost latest set of members. I think we're up to 170, 11 automakers, and a number of tier ones. Suppliers, and again, a growing base of open source expertise in our membership. I know that what we're seeing with our automotive OEMs, and even to a certain degree our tier one suppliers, many of them have competence in open source software development, but they're in very small pockets and they're not widely networked within the broader organization. And so they're going and they're developing partners with these open source expert companies. And really what GENIVI is doing, frankly, is it's kind of reorienting the supply chain which within the automotive community, because you know, it's not just the OEMs, you know, hitting the tier ones over the head with a big stick anymore. There's a whole new supply chain with operating system vendors like Mentor and so forth. So where are we at on adoption? I don't have any names here because that would be sort of letting the cat out of the bag here. But each of these arrows represents one or more GENIVI members who are, you know, at various degrees of adoption. Quite frankly, there's organizations who look at GENIVI as sort of a science experiment. We're on their research and development portfolio, but really not at that level of saying, yeah, we're ready to commit a product or a project to this. But you've also got organizations all the way at the other end who have already nominated a product and are already well into the delivery process of that product. And you'll see GENIVI-based head units being delivered, you know, in the next 6 to 12 months from probably multiple automotive organizations.